Hi guys, I'm Kasha. Welcome to my channel and to our coffee times together talking books. And I am here finally to tell you my top 10 of books that I read in 2019.
It's coffee time!
In order to make this list, I decided to not mention any Stephen King books, mostly because this year I've only had rereads from his books. I did plan on reading The Institute, but I did not get to it, so when it comes to rereads, I don't think it's fair to include them in this list because they are books that I had already read prior to 2019, so those are excluded from this list. And now let's start without any kind of order to mention the 10 books that either surprised me or that I just really enjoyed reading in 2019. Let's start with a couple of books that got a 4.5 coffee mug rating from me. The first one being The Diviners by Libba Bray. So I've been meaning to start this series for the longest time, but it always kind of pissed me off that they were changing the covers and the edition so much, so I kind of that made me so mad because of my OCD that I didn't want to pick it up. But then a bunch of people on Twitter wanted to read it because the last book in this series was coming out, and I decided to join. I thought, you know, this is a sign, this is now my time to read this, and I'm glad that I did because I really love this book. It was a chunky book, but I was so excited about the story and the characters, and I wanted to know what happened, and I loved the writing style that I just kept reading and reading, and I really loved it. My plan was to follow with the series, one book every month, but I just have not been able to because a lot of other things have come in between. But I did manage to read the first book in the series and really loved it. We are following Evie, and we are in the 1920s, and she has this gift that when she touches an object that belongs to someone, she can see some things from their past, and she sometimes cannot really control this gift. She doesn't know how to deal with it, and her parents, after an incident, decide to send her with her uncle to live in the city, and the uncle owns a museum that it's not doing really well, and there is this killer on the loose, the pentagram killer, and Evie kind of joins his uncle, her uncle, and tries to solve the mystery with him. And this book just has so many genres in one, and it's kind of like a horror, supernatural, thriller, I don't know, historical. It's just fantastic. I really loved it. And if you like, you know, kind of investigations and mystery supernatural thrillers, I really do recommend you to pick up this series. Next we have Contagion by Erin Bowman, and this is a book that I wanted to read because this year, sadly, I have nearly read zero science fiction, and I do like science fiction movies. When it comes to book, it depends a little bit on the book, but I wanted to read this one because it kind of mixed together science fiction and horror, which I love those kinds of stories, and I decided to pick it up, and I'm really glad that I did because it ended up surprising me. I ended up loving it more than I thought I would, because this is a YA science fiction horror, so I didn't know how much I was gonna love the story, but I just got so invested with the characters, and I was just rooting for them, and I just really had a good time. So now let's talk about the story. So we have these scientists performing some experiments in a lab, and suddenly an alarm sounds, and they are being evacuated in a spaceship. So we are in a futuristic universe, and basically when they're in the spaceship, they get these distraught signals. Somebody's asking for help, and they decide to go and investigate and help, and they find an empty spaceship, and they start digging, and they find out that there was a virus that got loose in that planet, and you know, they are now trying to escape this virus from catching up with them. And I really like that. I love stories about viruses and spaceships with, you know, virus that are threatening to kill the whole human species. I just really love those stories. One of my favorite horror slash sci-fi movies is Event Horizon. It will always be. I just love it so much, and I just really like this book. Maybe it's because it was the only kind of sci-fi that I read this year, maybe that's why, but I just really loved it, and I already got book 2 because I really liked book 1. Then I have a book that also really pleasantly surprised me, and that is Not Even Bos by Rebecca Schaeffer, and this is book 1 on the market of monsters. And this was so much more than I hoped for. It's one of those books that when you go into it, you know you like the premise, but you're scared you're not gonna love the execution. But this book was more disturbing and more bloody than I expected, so I think that's also why I loved it so much. And we're following the story of Nita. We are in an universe in which there are unnatural creatures, and those are being hunted by some and protected by others, and there is a black market in which parts of those unnatural creatures are being sold because they believe if you eat the parts of those unnatural creatures you might be able to get the same powers that they have. So Nita works with her mom. Her mom works like killing and chopping the unnatural creatures' bodies to sell them in the black market, but everything is so much more intricate than this. This is kind of like the premise, what you know at the very beginning, and it just starts to take turns, and I absolutely loved it. Now we move on to my 5 Coffee Mugs rating books, and the first one is Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. This is the first volume on the legacy of Orisha, and this is one of the fantasies that I have enjoyed the most in the last couple of years. I don't know what it is about it, but the whole atmosphere that the book has and the characters are so well fleshed out, and you're so invested in the story that I absolutely loved it. And it has kind of like a darkness cloud to it that I also really loved. And we are in a fantasy world in which magic has been banned, and there is this girl that it's the only hope to bring magic back. Sounds like a very cliche kind of scenario, but it was just so much more, and the adventures are fantastic. I just loved it so much when she starts going into this quest to try to bring magic back. It's just so enjoyable, and the second book just came out in December, and I really need to get to it. The next book is by an author that I discovered in 2019 that now is going to be an out by author for me, just because the writing is so tragic, just so beautiful, and that is We Are Okay by Ninella Kaur. So this was my first Ninella Kaur book. I read this I think for a readathon, and I absolutely loved it. It is about this girl that is spending Christmas alone at her dorm, and she's basically completely alone, and she's kind of going through her thoughts and things that has happened to her in the past. And her best friend decides to go and spend a couple of days with her and kind of rescue her from this loneliness. And it kind of reflects about life and love and being who you are and accepting yourself, and it's just so tragic. Like, it's one of those hard-hitting contemporaries that is hitting you in all the feels, but it also gives you a warm hug, and it kind of makes you feel warm again. But it's just her writing, it's so beautiful, so tragic, so beautiful, that, you know, I think every book by her, I might like it more or less, but just because of the writing, I do want to check out all her other books. Moving on with On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. So at the beginning of 2019, I finally got to read The Hate You Give and loved it. And then when On the Come Up was released, I immediately bought it and loved it. I love this one just a little bit more than The Hate You Give. I think because for some reason I could relate a lot more to Brie, and this one was a book that was very powerful, but it was also kind of funny, and I just love to see Brie grow up and be the woman that she, you know, always was meant to be. And it's about Brie, and her father died. Her father was a rapper, a famous rapper, and Brie's dream has always been to be a rapper as well. And her family is going through some hardship because they have really big money issues, and she wants to help her family by becoming a famous rapper. So we follow her kind of path to that, being a little girl of color. This book was perfect. It had everything in it. It had an amazing character. It was heartwarming. It was heartbreaking. It was funny. It was everything. And now let's go to the smutty romance, do me dirty, that made it into my top 10 of 2019, and that I actually would not mind rereading at all this year, and that is The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. This is one of the best hate to lovers relationship I've ever seen. and it made me giggle, it made me laugh out loud, it made me blush, and it was fantastic. I loved it so much. And we're following the story of Lucy and Joshua, and they come from enemy companies, in a way, of rival companies that actually one day merge together. So they have to work face to face with each other, and they hate each other's guts. But this hate starts to become passion and lust, and it was just fantastic. Like, if you have not picked up this book yet, and you love romance and you love hate to love relationships, I mean, this is the book for you. Normally I never give a 5 coffee mug rating to a romance book, just because they never fulfill me like other genres, and they always feel a little bit more like expected and things that I have already seen before. But this one, it was just so enjoyable, and I just wanted to keep reading, and it gave me comedy, and it gave me romance, and it gave me also smutty, so I just had to give it 5 coffee mugs. Next is the book that I think, if I would really make a top 10, this one might have been on the first place, just because it was just so heartbreaking, so sad, so tragic, but at the same time so beautiful that it just touched me in all the feels. And it's another one that I really want to reread at some point. So it's become now one of my favorites, even though trigger warning for abuse, rape, and murder. And that is I Stopped Somewhere by T. Carter. And this book for me is everything that The Lovely Bones was not. The Lovely Bones is one of those rare cases in which I love the movie more than the book. The book didn't really make it for me. And this is another story of a girl that is telling you her story when she's already dead. You already know that from the very beginning. And she's telling you her story of how she was raped. And it is just... it's just hard to read. So, you know, if those kind of topics do trigger you, just be warned before going into the book. So I always recommend people to go into this book when they are in a happy place because it is really tragic, but it is so beautifully written, and it is so powerful that it has become one of my faves. Next we have Murderabilia by Craig Robertson, and this is a book that I found at a discount bookstore here in Germany, and I was expecting just a regular thriller with some kind of true crime taste to it, but I didn't know I was going to enjoy this so much. It might be because I'm somebody that is really fascinated and intrigued by true crime stories, and this does touch those kind of things. And it is about an investigation that starts with trying to catch a killer, and one of the police that are investigating starts to go deeper into the dark web, where there is a part of the dark web where there is this black market for murderabilia, which is basically things that were used in a murder or that the victims of a murder were carrying. So it's kind of like murder memorabilia. And it kind of digs deeper into the cases, the people that collect these kind of things, and I think that just made it so interesting for me. And I thought it was a really well written book, and I also flew through this one, and it was one of the best kind of thriller stories for me for 2019 that I read. Probably I'm biased a little bit because I really like true crime, so when you go into this book, you know, warning for true crime stories. If you don't like those kind of things, if you're triggered by these kind of stories, then this might not be for you. And the last book that I want to talk to you about is another one that I discovered this year, and for me it was everything, and that is Endless Night by Richard Lehman. And also trigger warning for this book for everything: child abuse, rape, murder, body gore, everything. So if you are not a huge horror fan that likes really disturbing stuff, this probably is not for you. Just saying, this is not a regular thriller. This is a full-on horror experience, and we are following the story of two kids that are trapped in a house one night with their family when some people come in. So it's kind of like a home invasion story. That's how it starts, but it gets darker and darker as the book progresses, and the story gets more and more disturbing as you find out more things of these people, like what they have been doing and their past of the killers. For most of the book, it's kind of like a game of hide and seek between the killer and the kids, and it's just a very dark and twisted story. I always say it kind of reminds me a little bit to, you know, the Hannibal Lecter story, Leatherface, those kind of things, where it's just very disturbing and you get to know a little bit more of the background story of the killers and figure out why they are so messed up in their heads. But yeah, trigger warning for everything. But if you're into horror, you like disturbing stuff, please do give this book a chance. And there you have it. These are my top 10 books that I read in 2019. Let me know down below which are your favorite 3 books that you read in 2019 that made it to your top 10. Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. Please remember before you leave to give the video a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel as well, and also remember to hit the notification bell to get notified when I upload a new video. And I also do have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Goodreads. The links to those can be found in the description box down below, and I hope to see you all in the next coffee time. Bye.